The heat pressed down in waves as Evelyn Shaw stepped onto the tarmac, her boots scuffing against concrete baked pale by sun and exhaust. She wore a faded flight suit zipped to the collar, her long blonde hair tied back in a loose twist that caught the wind. In her left hand, a frayed canvas bag swung low. In her right, a handwritten flight card bent slightly from the sweat in her palm. No one looked twice at first. The line of aircraft shimmered ahead, sleek and metallic. New jets with composite wings and mission control paint jobs gleamed under spotlights meant to impress foreign brass. Her C-130 sat alone at the far edge, matte and silent, the paint dulled to gray and flaking in patches. A ground tech glanced up, squinting through oily sunglasses. "You lost." "Ma'am," he called without warmth. Another voice followed. "Maybe she's here to fix coffee for the real crews." Evelyn offered no answer. She kept walking. At the logistics tent, a junior officer took her card without meeting her eyes. One glance, a scoff. "You're not on the manifest." The card fluttered to the desk as he turned away to flag another clipboard. Behind her, laughter flared. She didn't speak. She walked back across the strip, past shadows and sun, and stopped beside her aircraft. No one followed. The whiteboard inside the mobile command unit had 3 thick red X's, each marked next to a flight number. Beneath them, a smaller line read, "TAC Zulu pending." The air inside was humid from sweat, radio heat, and frustration. Men moved between consoles with the sharp, brittle energy of failure, pressing against pride. Evelyn Shaw stood just inside the tent, unnoticed for nearly a full minute until a staff sergeant glanced up and sighed. "If you're here for evac scheduling, that's downrange at Ops 2, he said, thumbing toward another tent already sagging from overuse. Evelyn stepped forward. "I'm here to fly." He blinked. "Fly what?" "My aircraft, C-130. Another voice cut in Major Keene, clipped and already annoyed. "You're not on the current manifest. You're not cleared for active support. That aircraft hasn't been rated for canyon drift since the last terrain reclass." Evelyn held out a flight sheet with the updated configuration. Keene barely looked at it. "We've got qualified teams in the sky already. 3 failures don't mean we throw protocol out the window." Behind her, a younger pilot laughed. He wore a crisp flight suit with a custom patch stitched over the breast pocket. "What's next? Bring out the museum birds. Nostalgia in a flight suit. Reporting for duty." More chuckles followed, low and relieved. The joke gave them something to lean on. Evelyn didn't respond. She placed the sheet on the edge of a folding table and left the tent. Outside, the wind was shifting. A storm front loomed over the northern range, dark, close, unspoken. The last flyable drop aircraft sat grounded with its rear hydraulic hatch in full lock. A technician slammed his clipboard down and walked away, muttering about fried sensors. No one else had options. But no one looked at Evelyn. She sat on the ramp of her C-130. The fuselage around her bore the faded ghost of an old squadron insignia. A line of rivets along the cargo bay door had been buffed so smooth. Her palm rested against them without catching. Her canvas-bound manual sat open across her lap. The pages curled slightly at the corners. Inside, her initials were written in the margin E.S., next to hand-drawn trajectory curves and altitude compensation formulas. Across the tarmac, an officer pointed to the canyon relief map and raised his voice. "We don't have clearance to wait for miracles. Either we move it in the next 90 minutes, or we issue a fallback and call the zone unsupplied." A logistics tech glanced toward Evelyn, then away. No one asked her anything. A support lieutenant passed by and caught sight of the manual. "Where'd you dig that up?" "They scanned the new version into the drop system years ago." Evelyn flipped the page and kept reading. He gave a short laugh. "Good luck finding anything in that paperback relic." She didn't respond. The wind picked up again. Dust lifted in short swirls near the supply stacks. 2 medics walked past carrying empty crates, silent and frowning. From the canyon zone, a voice crackled faintly over the emergency backup channel. "We've got 24 hours of rations left. Water, half that. Any update appreciated. The line went quiet. No one answered. Inside the logistics trailer, a conversation hit a stuttered rhythm. They were recycling plans now, talking in circles. One flight officer said, "We can't run another attempt without authorization. The only available airframe is," and stopped short. They knew, but no one moved. Outside, Evelyn stood and folded the manual shut. Her thumb lingered for a moment on the initials. She slid it into her pack and rose onto the ramp. The sun was lower now. The mountains in the distance had gone from gold to red. She reached up and gripped the edge of the cargo bay, tested the load strap with a slow pull, then walked inside. Her figure disappeared into the shadow of the aircraft. No one called out. The runway lights flickered on. The storm line edged closer behind her, and the only sound that followed was the groan of the wind against metal as Evelyn began checking the flight lines alone. The pallet sat alone in the middle of the cargo bay, strapped down by Evelyn's hands. Each tie was checked twice, looped with the precision of habit. The parachute rig was older than most of the crew on base, packed by memory rather than by digital readout. Evelyn crouched beside the mechanism and turned the timing knob slowly, watching the mechanical counter tick forward. 5 seconds. No automation. No override. Just airspeed, weight, and instinct. Outside, the bass stirred louder. Radios hissed. Lights clicked from amber to red. The third weather alert chimed from the tower, and in the command tent, officers huddled in loops of indecision. A final request had just come in, urgent, strained. The zone still needed the drop. No airframes were cleared. No crew was willing. Evelyn didn't wait. Her boots hit the ramp with a thud. She walked to the cockpit, hair tied tight, sleeves pushed back to her elbows. The flight card sat beside the throttle lever, unsigned and unstamped, but folded neatly. She placed it under the edge of the panel. A quiet nod to the system that had erased her. The C-130's engines turned over with a reluctant groan. 1, then 2, then all 4 roared alive. The ground around her rippled with dust. Nearby techs turned toward the sound. One reached for a radio, hesitated, then lowered it. No one moved. Inside the command center, a controller looked up sharply. "Is she moving?" The young officer at the console froze. "She doesn't have clearance. That aircraft's not on the roster." "Call it in." The tower lit up. Evelyn taxied forward. Unscheduled movement on Delta 2. A controller barked into the mic. "Advise immediate shutdown. You do not have clearance to take off." No response. A second voice, angrier, cut through. "C-130 on taxi line. Stand down or face disciplinary action. This is a direct order." Still nothing. The hulking aircraft turned onto the active runway, slow and deliberate. A junior officer jogged toward it, then stopped, caught in the crosswinds of its passing. Evelyn didn't even glance down. Inside the cockpit, switches flipped under her fingers. Her face was calm. The lines of her jaw set, but not rigid. The engine vibration traveled up through her boots, into her spine. She read wind direction from tower flags, ignored the forecasted turbulence. There was no co-pilot, no confirmation, just the cargo, her hands, and the sky. A final call buzzed in. "You are not cleared. Do you copy?" Evelyn reached for the comm switch, hovered a moment, then let her hand fall to the throttle. She pushed forward. The C-130 surged down the strip. The sound built like thunder rolled into steel. The metal frame rattled, old bolts and patches trembling with strain, until the lift finally caught. Tires left the ground. The landing gear pulled up slow and uneven, but it held. The plane rose, low, hugging the treetops like a ghost through muscle memory. Inside the bay, the lights flickered as she banked gently south. The temperature dropped. Evelyn leveled out, checked heading, and gave one glance to the folded flight card. Then she slid it back into her jacket. The radio channels were silent now. No more orders, no more laughter, just wind. On the ground, the base stood still. The runway empty, officers frozen at consoles. The aircraft was gone. No one had stopped her. And for the first time all day, no one had anything left to say. The canyon rose up like a set of jaws, the walls jagged and steep with narrow shadows clinging to their folds. Wind streamed off the rocks in unseen shears, turning the air into a shifting current of threat. Evelyn flew in low, skimming just above the tree line. There were no beacon pings, no GPS cues, no radioed elevation checks, only the terrain, the memory of its contour etched into her hands, and the weight of the crate behind her. She adjusted the flaps manually. The dial clicked hard, resisting. The right wing dipped as the crosswind hit. She corrected with a nudge of rudder and throttle, keeping the aircraft level. The cockpit shuddered under strain. One loose panel above her left shoulder rattled with a sharp, metallic whine. The light was failing fast. Sunlight struck the canyon edge at an angle too steep to help. Shadows stretched across her path, cutting visibility to flickering glimpses between rock outcroppings and brush-covered spines. She reached for the stopwatch clipped to her flight harness. The glass was cracked. It still worked. In the back, the cargo bay was lit only by a single overhead strip. The crate sat centered, rigged with a scarlet parachute folded by hand, cords measured without template. The chute's color had faded at the edges, but the stitching was fresh, reinforced. Evelyn had tied each strap herself. She knew exactly how long it would take to open, to stabilize, to fall. She exhaled once and scanned the ridgeline. The wind shifted. Again. A tremor rolled through the aircraft. Nothing dramatic, just a sudden pocket of air gone missing beneath her left wing. She rolled slightly, corrected again. Her knuckles were pale on the throttle, but her face was steady. Down below, somewhere beyond the tree line, was the makeshift field, a flattened patch marked by tarps and signal die barely wide enough for a clean drop. No electronic targeting, no confirmation beacon, just a margin of guesswork the size of a dinner table. She keyed the bay door release. The lever caught once before it unlocked with a groan. Behind her, the ramp lowered, letting in cold wind and the sound of flight become exposed roar. The crate stood alone, the straps taut. She watched its edges vibrate as the air pressed through the open frame. No sound from the ground, no signal flare, just her own sense of distance. Evelyn counted backward from 5. She kept her eyes on the terrain the way the shadows broke against that one shelf of rock, the scatter of treetops beyond. She adjusted speed slightly, nose down half a degree, left wing tipped for wind drift. She breathed again. 4. She touched the edge of the cracked stopwatch. 3. The walls of the canyon pressed close. A loose tree branch blew past the window like a bird. 2. She placed her right hand on the release mechanism. Fingers curled tight. 1. She pulled. The crate shot back on its rails, the lock disengaging with a hard snap. Air caught the chute instantly. For half a second it flared wide, then collapsed, then bloomed open scarlet against shadow. The crate lurched, corrected, spun once midair, then steadied. From above, it looked like a speck descending through silence. She couldn't see the final landing. The drop field was hidden by treetops and slope, but she saw the angle, the wind correction, the stabilization. She knew. She keyed the bay door shut, the ramp raised, sealing the roar back into a low hum. Her hands returned to the controls. She eased the throttle forward and began a long, slow climb. The C-130 responded grudgingly, like an old animal waking. The altimeter ticked upward. The walls of the canyon dropped away behind her. The sky opened. She touched the edge of the cockpit panel, the spot worn smooth where countless hands had rested before hers. For a moment she left her hand there, palm down, fingers loose. Then she pulled back, leveled out, and flew into the clouds. Below her, no one knew her name, but the crate had landed, and that was all that mattered. The first voice came through faint and clipped. A medic on the canyon line spoke without urgency, without disbelief, just with the calm of something complete. "We got it. We're good." There was a long pause before the next radio crackled in. Another voice confirmed visual contact. The pallet had landed intact. No drift. No loss. Relief personnel were already unpacking supplies. Inside the command tent, no one looked up. A captain clicked his pen twice, crossed out a red X on the whiteboard, and wrote nothing else. One of the failed pilots stood by the exit with his helmet under his arm, staring at the floor. Without a word, he stepped out and never came back. The shift changed, quietly, completely. Out on the strip, Evelyn's C-130 sat near the center, now moved, reparked, no longer hidden along the fringe. The dust had settled on its wings. The hangar floodlights caught its rough metal skin and gave it new shape. No one touched it. No one joked. A mechanic approached with slow steps and set a thermos down beside the cargo ramp. No label, no tag, just placed there with care, then walked away. Evelyn sat on the wing, one leg draped over the edge, the other propped under her as she leaned against the fuselage. Her flight report was spread across her lap. She wrote slowly in ink-black pen, block letters, exact. Each entry matched the time on her stopwatch. No one asked for it, but she logged everything. A junior airman crossed the tarmac carrying 2 clipboards. He passed her plane, paused, then glanced around. Without a word, he adjusted the manifest on his top sheet and slipped Evelyn's code into the margin. It wasn't official, but it would be there. Near the logistics tent, voices lowered. A conversation stopped mid-sentence when Evelyn walked past, then resumed in a new tone, more careful. Someone moved a stack of crates to give her space, unprompted. Another nodded as she passed, unsure whether to salute. Inside the office trailer, the commander scanned the day's dispatch list. He saw the unmarked entry, Evelyn's flight number written by hand. His eyes lingered. Then he reached for his pen and signed the bottom of the page without comment. Outside, the airstrip was quieter than it had been in days. The sharp edges of tension had dulled into something else, uneasy, watchful, maybe even reverent. No one used her name, but no one looked past her anymore. Evelyn folded her report and tucked it into her flight bag. She slid off the wing with practiced ease, boots landing in dust. She picked up the thermos, turned it once in her hand, and carried it up the ramp. The cargo bay lights flickered on with a soft whine. She sat in the rear of the aircraft, cross-legged on the bay floor, thermos beside her, the flight bag at her feet. No one came to thank her. No one dared, and she didn't need them to. She had been there when they needed someone. She had flown when no one else would. Now she sat alone, the same woman they'd dismissed, but no longer invisible. It started as a footnote, a regional military column, filed 3 days after the canyon drop, included a brief mention of an unauthorized flight that succeeded where 3 sanctioned missions had failed. No names, no aircraft numbers, just a single line. An older C-130 made the final pass. The supplies landed clean. A few readers noticed. One of them, a retired historian with an eye for old manuals, recognized the drop arc described in the piece. He pulled an outdated training file from his shelf and flipped to the canyon flight section. There, in faded print, was the handwritten note, "Adjusted timing interval per ES manual override model." That scan made its way to a veteran's blog, buried in a long thread of posts about lost skills. It would have ended there if not for the video. A grainy training clip, archived from a long-forgotten logistics server, began to circulate quietly among defense instructors. It showed only terrain from a cockpit's point of view, no faces, no names. But the voice narrating over the footage was steady, low, and calm. This is where you trust feel over forecast. You're not flying through numbers, you're flying through memory. People began asking, who said that? It wasn't long before someone matched the voice to the old drop protocol recordings, back when canyon insertions were still taught without software. The name that came up wasn't listed on any current faculty, roster, or award citation, but it was there, buried in the archive metadata. Evelyn Shaw. Her name surfaced in instructor forums, then in advanced courses. Young pilots whispered it the way climbers speak of the ones who free solo admiration edged with disbelief. Flight schools added a line to their Canyon module timing drills. The Evelyn interval. No one formally endorsed it. No one announced it. But instructors across 3 bases started saying the same thing: if you can't make the drop at her pace, you're not ready. A still photo appeared next a wide-angle frame of her aircraft rolling down the airstrip, taken from the base security feed, uploaded anonymously. The plane's matte finish and worn silhouette looked surreal against the polished tarmac. Someone captioned it. She flew it anyway. The phrase spread in small corners of the internet. It appeared on stickers in hangars, on whiteboards in classrooms, typed in small font on the corner of a patch. It wasn't a slogan, just something people repeated when they talked about pilots who didn't wait for approval to do what needed to be done. No one interviewed Evelyn. No articles followed. She didn't respond to requests or show up at any symposiums. But over time, the hangar she used began to draw quiet visitors. Cadets walked past slower. Veterans from old transport wings stood in its shadow with long silences. No formal tour, no plaque, but they lingered. An airman from the latest rotation found an old flight log stuffed into a side cabinet near her station. The signature at the bottom read ES, reconfirmed by hand. He didn't file it. He scanned it, posted it once, then placed it back where he found it. And still Evelyn never appeared. She was seen once more by a mechanic early morning, weeks after the mission. She wore the same flight suit, carried the same bag, and checked the same engine panel on her C-130. She left no note. She spoke to no one. By the time anyone checked, the aircraft had moved. At the back wall of the hangar, below the switchboard, someone taped a scrap of yellow paper. On it, in block print, was written, "No clearance needed when you're already over the target." The quote was misattributed to a training officer, but everyone knew who it belonged to, and no one took it down. The runway was empty except for the wind. It tugged at a faded windsock hanging limp from its mast, catching now and then with a snap that echoed faintly off the tin hangars. Heat shimmered on the tarmac. The sky was wide and unbroken, washed in gold. Evelyn's C-130 sat alone near the edge of the strip, its dull surface warmed by sun. The plane looked older now, more worn, more deliberate. But it was clean, maintained, ready. The cargo ramp was lowered halfway, casting a long shadow across the tarmac like a threshold between places no one else had names for. She moved with quiet efficiency, checking tire pressure, wiping grit from the intake seams, securing a single crate in the bay. The crate had no markings, just a plain steel surface, bolted shut, strapped in with care. She pulled the last strap taut, then stepped back to review it once more. A pack hung across one shoulder. Her flight suit was sun-faded at the seams, the fabric softened by time. She paused near the wing, squinting into the wind, then reached up and pressed her palm once against the undercarriage. The gesture had no ceremony, just memory. Across the strip, a young pilot in a fresh uniform watched. He didn't call out, didn't wave. He simply stood still as Evelyn climbed the ramp. She paused at the top, not to look back, just to let the quiet finish forming around her. Then the door closed. The aircraft sat a moment, engines silent. The windsock snapped once more. Dust drifted in lazy curls beneath the belly of the plane. And then the engines came alive low, even, and rising. The C-130 rolled forward with weight and purpose. No tower cleared it. No lights flashed. The wheels left the ground, and she lifted into the sky, steady and small against the light. She was overlooked, dismissed, and ignored, not because she lacked skill, but because she didn't demand to be seen. Evelyn Shaw never raised her voice, never argued her worth. She simply prepared, acted, and delivered when no one else could. In a world chasing titles and permission, she chose precision and silence. Her strength came not from being recognized, but from knowing who she was when no one was watching. This story reminds us that quiet courage matters, that some of the most extraordinary acts happen far from spotlight or applause. So, If you've ever been underestimated, remember Evelyn, and if her story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Share your thoughts in the comments, or follow for more stories like this about the power of staying steady when others look away. Because sometimes, the quietest flight leaves the deepest impression.